Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us to talk about teen financial literacy. I want to go ahead and just introduce everyone here. I'm Jennifer Myers, President of SageVest Wealth Management. Also joining us and presenting for this overview is Dan Serra, who is a Senior Wealth Advisor with our firm, and Kathy Jaquette, who is our Manager of Office Operations and who's going to be helping with some of the functioning of this meeting. So I will hop right in and share my screen so that we can get started. Okay. So again, we'll be talking about financial literacy for teens during this presentation. Let's move forward. Just as an overview of who we are and what we do, just to kick off, SageVest Wealth Management, we created sort of an offshoot of our company that is SageVest Kids and focuses on financial literacy. But technically, we are a wealth management firm. We are an independent and fee-only wealth management firm located in McLean, Virginia. We also proudly serve as a fiduciary, which requires our firm by law to put our clients' best interest at the helm of our decision-making. We predominantly work with individuals and families and helping them to identify and secure their financial objectives, retirement, college savings, what have you, anything germane to every client. We also, really pride ourselves in being very client focused and offering the highest caliber of service to our clients. We're extremely diligent and really are proactive in our planning efforts and know our clients well. As part of operating our firm, we are very committed to giving back to our broader community. So I will just also point out that we launched a while back a retirement resource center, which can be found at our main company website, that gives insights to people as they prepare for retirement, enter retirement, and hopefully enjoy retirement. We also launched a kids financial literacy website, which is technically a sister website that really helps to hopefully prepare the next generation to have greater financial literacy from some more foundational ages. It's been a personal objective of mine in trying to better establish the next generation financially, and also just in 25 years of working with clients and seeing that I think we can help our clients as well as the broader community in not just sometimes our clients, pride themselves understandably in funding college, but making sure that your child is financially prepared for life goes many steps further, and giving, the tools and resources for parents to do so. So I'll briefly just pop out of the presentation to just show you where to find some of those resources. So this is our main website at sagevestwealth.com. And under our services, as well as other things, we have a retirement resource center here, which when you delve into it gives a number of different items that we have written on various topics, such as planning for retirement, benefits available to you in retirement, healthcare, housing, lifestyle, legacy planning predominantly. There's also a wealth of resources external to what we have developed to give you a robust overview. Also, under services, you can find a direct link to SageVest Kids. And it talks a little bit about the site. As you can see here, we offer different ideas and methods of teaching financial literacy to children of all ages, and starting as early as age 3 to 4, obviously not counting money that young, but starting to lay a foundation for children We understand that you may not be starting that young if your child is in their teen years, but just giving you some of the depth. I'll just pop into the site briefly. And again, as you go into some of those age groups, what we do is outline just some of the key basics to be focusing on at that age time frame, and then different topics in further depth. That as you click on these about peer pressure, responsibilities, a broad array of topics, you can expand each of these further to get more insight and depth on any topic. There is also resources on specific areas to consider, such as chores, allowances, jobs, money, personalities, college savings, as well as activities and resources such as apps, books, activities. And then we also have a blog that's fairly robust in terms of offering different articles on specific topics. We'll outline a few that we think in the presentation that we think are, most honed in to topics that you might be considering with teens, but the topics on here definitely explore to a wide array of considerations and planning ideas. So I'll hop back to the presentation so we can go ahead and get started. We'll be talking about a number of different ideas in this presentation, including why financial literacy is important, some of the fundamental building blocks that go into hopefully a layering process of financial literacy. I am a believer of you don't necessarily try to conquer the world in one fell swoop, that it helps to get a baseline and layer on to that. Conversations that are important to have with your team before he or she graduates from high school, financial mechanisms that can help and aid you, and then considerations relevant to careers longer term. So I just want to point out that, again, we have resources that begin as early as age 3 to 4. That said, our motto is that it's never too early or too late to really start a financial literacy education. So even if you have not started layering a full context of the ideas, it's just important to really start focusing, and hopefully we'll give you some of the concepts to get you started. In terms of why financial literacy matters, it is true that money cannot buy happiness. That said, having a strong financial literacy background and knowledge base can really enhance your life long term. We note some of the benefits achieved by having strong financial skills, certainly having stronger self-confidence. But if you have this knowledge in the background, you feel more secure and capable in your decision making. Certainly, money and financial stability offers greater life opportunities and what you can pursue. And related to that are greater financial freedoms for yourself and what, longer term somebody can offer to their family. It really helps to reduce stress. We'll talk about this on the next slide, but stress in terms of not having a strong financial standing is a predominant concern. And then just having a healthy relationship with money leads to having oftentimes a healthier relationship with family and loved ones. A lot of strife that happens in marriages and family relationships frequently revolves around money. So if you have a better backdrop with money management, it can help to avert some of those scenarios. So if these are things that you really want your kids to achieve long-term, it just really emphasizes the importance of working on helping your children with achieving financial literacy. Just some quick statistics. As mentioned on the prior page, these are based upon various studies. But of one study, 73 of the respondents mentioned that finances were their top reason for experiencing stress in life. Of another study, 66 respondents answered that they did not have the right answers to 3 out of 5 just very basic questions about finances and financial literacy. And almost 40% of the population the American population can't afford $1,000 emergency expense, which obviously is a material number. But as you think about your life experiences, I'm sure you can easily come up with an emergency expense of $1,000. Okay. The good news is that in recent years, and really since the Great Recession in 2008, many high schools have really expanded their financial literacy programs. In Virginia, in most schools, completing a financial literacy course is required for graduation, and we certainly applaud that, and it helps. However, we truly don't believe that financial literacy can be achieved simply in attending a class, whether it be for a year or a semester. To really have a true effective financial literacy foundation, we think it really requires a combination of education, which can be achieved in school, but we think also augmenting it with educational opportunities outside of school is important. From observation, in terms of what they're observing from you, in terms, your personality with money management, your approach to money management, your discussion about decisions relative to finances, etc., and then influences they're being exposed to relative to peers, etc. If individuals are coming up to school driving a BMW, it has an impact in terms of view on life. Experience is really a key factor that we'll be talking about, and it gets into some of the building blocks that you have to go many steps further than just, a textbook or a discussion. The best way to learn in really any element of life is through true hands-on experience. And that also leads to our final point, that hopefully you want your kids to succeed in their experiences, but we firmly believe that just as every aspect of helping your kids grow and mature, that mistakes will happen and learning from those mistakes. So I'll turn this over to Dan now to lead into some of the building blocks of financial literacy.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you everyone for joining us. I want to get into now the building blocks that we talked about earlier to start understanding these key points in financial literacy. As with anything we want to learn about, we need to start with learning objectives. So if you want to sort of think of these as that, these are the 6 points, I think, to master this financial education and create this healthy habits for managing money. So let me just touch first on these. The first block is having an understanding of how money works in our society. Some of this has been explored in some government or social studies classes at school. So parents can build on this by explaining the role it plays in your household. We talk about mistakes we've made with our money, opportunities we've had to improve our finances, good examples to start sharing that with your teen. Another good example to share with your teen is to teach them how to shop, even comparison shop. Take them out and let them get a sense of how much things cost, especially these days with inflation a little higher. I have a junior in high school, and she's been doing some shopping on her own now that she's working. And she's understanding that, I need to make some decisions here on my spending because it's my money. And they become a little more aware of good money management when they're using their own money. Second is that responsibility of knowing the limitations of that spending. So this is where that making the budget becomes a key exercise for the student. Parents may want to share their own budget with their child. And if you don't want to share actual dollars, you can do it in percentages. For example, 30% of our income goes to housing, 10% to gas. Seems like it's getting to that point. So going through these wants and needs of spending helps the teen understand the spending decisions and choices that are made as a household. So they can then translate that into, well, can I go out with my friends, or do I need to save some of my money to buy gas? Things like that. So they start understanding the budgeting concept. And so it's also important then to set those expenses that are to be paid by the parent and the ones by the child. So there's those clear boundaries of what the child can expect to pay. And that spending number obviously is derived from the earnings that are made, especially by the child. They can appreciate the value of working and the effort they give, and how that translates into how much they can spend and save. So if a student wants to work just a few hours a week, their budget reflects that. Parents should set expectations for what a child's earnings should be used for, such as my daughter likes to work, and we've set the expectation that she uses her money to go hang out at the mall with her friends. So that's her spending money, at least part of it, because we also want to get into the next part, and that is knowing what to save. So that's the most important part of budgeting, is knowing what not to spend, and instead save it for some future expenses that they may want to be saving up for. So this is a sure way, obviously, also to stay out of debt, or to keep debt low in the future, to have that good saving habit that can help them avoid any problems with debt in the future. So like if you have what my dad called holes in your pocket, it's sometimes a little harder, especially as a teenager. When they make money, they want to start spending money. So there's some good conversations there for the discipline of how not to spend everything you earn. So as this cash flow develops, we need a home for our money. And that's the next point of understanding how the banking system works, primarily the technology. Many parents like me remember standing in line at the teller at the bank, but those days have gone for many of us. In fact, my neighborhood bank recently remodeled and eliminated teller windows. So it's now just offices when you go in. But it's still important, I think, for a teen to visit the bank and see, what's there and how it works. So I made it a point really to go in there with my team, especially to open an account so they can see how that process works. And you can also understand, what the bank's offering. And get explanations or help with any online banking systems that they use. And obviously the most important is Venmo. A lot of kids are already using that today. So understand how that works. And then also how the ATM at the bank works. Withdrawing and deposit money sometimes has to be done in person. So if the bank's not open, there's the ATM, how to use that. And I especially stress to my daughter to do it in a safe environment, right? Especially these days when they're out a little later at night. Know when's a safe time to use an ATM. The next step there about borrowing, that will start to get more in tune later as they age. But right now, just knowing the dangers of advantages of borrowing money is important. And right now, it's most likely borrowing from a friend. So, you want to make sure that they are not in a habit of getting in too much debt with a friend. Because borrowing and money from people can be a sign of overspending. They're not following a budget. So make sure that that's under control. And as they get into young adults, also that they begin responsibly using the credit card or debit card that they have. So there is debt that's good. So you don't want to scare them away from debt, but there's student loans, very important, car loans to get you to work or school. So there's a way to manage those. It's just a matter of keeping them within a limit where you can afford them, especially paying the bills in the future. I notice at the end here, we do not mention investing. At this stage, we don't think it's time to make investments, as this could complicate things, basically, such as when account is suddenly down 20% and child has expenses to pay. That could scare off a young investor because it's very important to invest in the future. But as far as now, they're really learning the cash flow system that they should manage. So, we're seeing a lot of things in the market right now that are scary. So that's a great example of why they probably should not be in the market right now when they have some earning money that they want to be spending and saving. But we'll talk about that in the future when they get into young adulthood. And we'll also have a few tips on that later in the slide. So on the next slide, I want to give you just a really good head start here with this checklist to try to help your child meet financial education goals. So parents and students obviously should discuss those 6 building blocks I just talked about, and then know how to budget both now and for the future, have a good dialogue between both of you to know how money issues should be addressed as a family, challenges you are having, opportunities for using your money. So at this age, money should not be a secret. I think it's very important to have those open conversations. It's best to share these strengths and challenges and opportunities early with smaller amounts on the line, because if it's ignored now, and there could be big problems in the future when they're not clearly understanding how their financial literacy can affect them in the future. So Jennifer, I'll let you take the next slides.
So we'll now get into some of the conversations that we feel are important to have with your kids before they graduate from high school. I will say that this slide gets into college considerations. We understand that not every teen is going to be graduating and heading off to college, but we felt it was important to touch upon. And there are some just elements, that pertain to others, but everyone has different finances and resources. And sometimes parents, pay for the bulk of college, but not always, whether it's a reason of do they have the ability to do so, or are they willing to do so? We think it's important to really have that discussion before it's time to pick a college, to give your teen some time to contemplate and deliberate on how the finances will be structured. And there are different reasons why. Even if you're able to fund it, sometimes parents feel that it's important that kids just have some skin in the game, that it may make them more focused on their academics, that they have some financial component. It's also just helping to layer further financial literacy of having some financial management of expenses while in college. So some key things to consider that if your kids are going to be responsible for a component of educational costs, where that might be sourced from, whether it's savings that they've accumulated, or earnings that they're achieving. Scholarships and grants are a great place to supplement educational costs. We do have a blog piece on our website that gets into some ideas on that could be helpful. Work study is oftentimes offered as a way to defray expenses. Sometimes family members want to participate in educational funding. We frequently see this among grandparents, that if there's one thing that if they want to provide some financial help to family members, college tends to oftentimes be top of the list. And then to the extent that these are not these do not cover a deficit, loans are distinctly an option. I think we've probably all seen an article or two here about some of the problems that student loans are creating, particularly if they're too large. So some different considerations are looking at federal versus private loans. Federal loans are oftentimes the best if they're available in terms of flexibility and rates. Deciding who's going to be the borrower, if the parent is going to sign and have the financial obligation, or the student. And then I think it's really important to discuss what the debt servicing is going to be on that loan relative to future earnings in a career, to make sure that it's manageable versus overwhelming. Whether your child is heading off to college or pursuing, an immediate work experience, we think we've outlined some just common expenses here that we think are good to go over with your teen. They're not fully encompassing, but I feel like they give at least, a good start. The first few here are relative to going to college in terms of tuition, room, board, books. If they want to go somewhere on spring break, traveling home, perhaps they want to study abroad. Trying to get a sense of what those might cost, and again, who is going to pay what amount. Other more generic, whether you're going to college or not, items are electronic, cell phone, furnishing, whether it's a dorm room or an apartment. We do mention renter's insurance because when your kids leave your house, the belongings they have in their dorm room or their apartment, should there be a flood or a fire, you want to make sure that you have insurance to replace those items. Other more generic items are, groceries and dining out. We have an asterisk here relative to if your child is in college to really discuss the meal plan that might be paid for, that if you're paying for those meals, ideally your college student is utilizing that meal plan versus simply using, Uber Eats or Grubhub or just, regular takeout, dining in. Just basic toiletries. I think we've probably all been surprised when we go to CVS just to pick up, some shampoo, some allergy medicine these days, whatever it is. And you get to the checkout counter, and it's like, boy, it's that much. So having that experience, clothing, the gym, sports and entertainment, just basic transportation, a car, bus, what have you, subscription. So there, again, it's not fully encompassing, but it gives you at least an initial pretty solid list of things to consider. In terms of work, we are pretty firm believers that having some work experience is important for teens and as they move into college. Different parents have different feelings on it. There's no right or wrong, but we'll just cover some considerations. Obviously, one thing to consider is, when your child might be encouraged or expected to work, whether that's now in high school, and how that weighs out with academic objectives. Summer is probably the easiest decision because you don't have the overlay of school and studying. Whether or not they're expected to work while they're in college and balancing that, or post-graduation, even if they're not going to college, and then sort of how much work is expected, relative to part-time, how many hours versus full-time. An important thing going back to that budget and who will pay for what is how those earnings will be allocated. Going to some of Dan's points of, having money to spend while out with friends, how much of their earnings should be allocated to current spending versus maybe how much should be allocated to expenses for longer term expenses, buying a car, new skis, whatever it is. Also having spending money in college. I'm personally an advocate, even if you're paying for college, to at least let your teen have experience with managing some of the day-to-day expenses and making sure they know, as Dan got into with the foundational steps of making sure your dollars last, 2 weeks, a month, what have you. And then, a lot of times when younger adults are working, it's not uncommon for there to be fluctuations in earnings. So I think it's important to discuss in advance how your money management might relate to that. It might just be, varying hours relative to what's offered by the employer or what can be achieved during finals, say, and then obviously seasonal work will vary. Some other important discussions to consider, particularly as your teen turns 18, some key points are if you have any custodial accounts for that teen, the control of those accounts shifts to the child who's now at age of majority. You cannot simply just tuck those statements somewhere for your teen not to see. Most accounts now go on what I call lockdown, where you can't make changes in the account until you convert it over into the name of the beneficiary, at which point he or she takes full control. You cannot stay on unless they, want to make you a joint owner. I will make a note that in the state of Virginia, it must be done before the teen turns 18. Many institutions do allow that age of majority to be extended to age 21, which gives you a little more runway. And just coming back up here, we think it's really important that if an account is transferring over to your child's ownership, that you have an open discussion about how much it is, how that relates to upcoming expenses, and just proper money management. Because I have seen teens who have come into what I would consider a fairly modest amount of money, and they suddenly feel like they're millionaires because they haven't had the life experience that we've had. There are distinctly freedoms that come with turning 18. Voting. I firmly believe that everyone should be voting and participating, so register to vote. We'll talk about this later, but credit cards, that you can sign for a credit card. So having an open discussion about that, and that you do have the ability now to sign legal documents, which gets us into this third key point, that everyone really over the age of 18 should have at a minimum 2 basic documents of a power of attorney and a healthcare directive, that if anything were to happen to a young adult, hopefully not, but if it does, that somebody can step in and make decisions and manage affairs on behalf of that individual. These are the 2 easiest documents to obtain. So it's not, you don't have to spend a lot of money in working with an attorney. They're pretty straightforward. So I'll hand it back to Dan to go over some of the mechanics to consider post-high school.
Okay, so this is the fun part, because if your teenagers like mine, their life is on technology. So now is a good opportunity to show them how this technology can help them with their money. So there's lots of great apps out there. They can just log on and quickly, as faster than looking at a TikTok, they can see how their money is tracking with different various spending trackers that are out there. They can get a picture each month of what they're spending, what's coming into their bank account, whether it's an app like Mint, or even their bank may offer an app that shows these transactions and gives spending and reports. So in some cases, maybe like mine, the child needs to teach the parent how to use this technology. So very important to use that opportunity of their interest in technology to show them how they can manage their money with technology. So let's look at the next slide here and talk about some of the, are we on the next
I'll just layer in quickly that, I often contemplate going back to some of those statistics of if we had some of the technology tools that we have today, would life be better for many people? Because you truly can set up technology today where at the, in the palm of your hand, you can have an application that tells you, okay, you're doing well relative to your goals, or you're kind of falling behind and it's time to, kind of reevaluate. So it really, give your kid the tools to really help them set a strong path forward. Go ahead, Dan, sorry.
Yeah, that's great. And also, with Venmo being very common today, make sure they're responsible with it by setting up some best practices. A few of them we've listed here. So first of all, with Venmo and some of these payment apps, there's potential for overdrafting. Venmo does not allow overdrafts. So if it's linked to an account and suddenly you need to transfer money, you also realize it may not be instant. Some of them have a fee for instant transfers, but otherwise that auto replenishment feature cannot be as instant as we would like it to be. So be careful of, how does the technology work as far as transferring money and depositing money and seeing, just the mechanics of how an app works before you actually use it. So make sure you understand, first of all, those technology points. And also, Venmo can be linked to that credit card. So it's often a good idea maybe to use a credit card that has a lower limit. So if anything happens, if the account is compromised, or just to help the child stay on budget, to make sure that there's a limit there to how much that can be transferred through the Venmo. And then also check the default settings, because a lot of these apps also have a public view, like a social media network, where you can see who's sending what money where and who's receiving money. So if you want to, value some privacy there and not let others see what your transactions are, you want to check those privacy settings.
And we do have an article that goes into a little more detail on our website about both PayPal and Venmo that might be of interest.
Let's touch briefly here on credit cards. Here are some tips on managing those when you're in a position to start using a credit card. So it's going to be very important to get a credit card, I think, in the future, because that helps establish the credit, whether you use it or not. Even, many employers are going to look at a teen's or any applicant's credit record to see how responsible they are. They use that as a way to evaluate a job candidate. Different places may charge you different rates based on your credit score, like insurance companies. So you want to make sure you have a good credit and you start out right using it. So let's take a look at some other points here. You can set up auto payment on these credit cards. That's a good way to keep you from getting a bad credit report, because it's automatic payment. You'll never forget that payment. So it's a good time to have the auto payment on at all times. So I would also suggest the parents show the child how to monitor their credit, even what a credit score is, how to look up your credit score. A lot of the banks now are offering free credit scores, so you can check with your bank to see if they have that. But just some good points here for the best practices for credit cards. So on the next slide, we talked about some of the technology. Let's look at actual tools that you could use for technology. There's plenty out there, so this is just a sample of what's out there. So take a look, but we found a few here that could help you understand what type of technology is out there. So starting out with a bank account, like we mentioned earlier, you can ask your bank about specific accounts they have for teenagers. Two of them that we found were PNC Bank and Capital One. They have special accounts set up just for teenagers. They have the apps that they can use. They can do Zelle payments or even Venmo, link the account to that. So it's very useful to have a child understand how a bank account works. I think that was my teenager's first exposure really to understanding, what my balance is, how much money I have, what can I spend, what can I save, to see that on the app, what the balance is on the account. And since they're minors, the parent is also on the account. So that helps you monitor what they're doing. I can see transactions. I don't monitor it closely, but once in a while I'll look or get an alert that there's a low balance. And then, it's just a good talking point to bring up to see if everything's okay. And just to make sure also that there's not an oversight by the teen that could result in a fee. Some of these accounts will charge fees for overdrafts. For somebody, a teen or even a preteen, there's a number of services that are having debit cards and games and educational apps for kids, at the younger ages. Some of those are Go Henry and FamZoo, very well designed to help children learn about money, whether through videos, quizzes, and games. And then they also come with a debit card that you can actually give the child, especially if they go out somewhere and you're not there and they need to make a purchase, they can use this debit card. One I mentioned here too is Goal Setter. That's a new one that's come out. And this is actually like a social network for the family. Every family member can have an account through this program. So the parent can transfer money from their account to the child's account, like when they're paying allowances. They have some educational parts of that, where if the child does not complete a certain lesson, then their debit card will freeze. So it encourages the child to learn by letting them not spend money until they complete an assignment. So I thought that's pretty neat that some of these other apps don't offer, but I would look at that. So it can be very important sometimes, especially if they lose that card, you can go in there and freeze that debit card. For college students, Discover Card markets to them a low limit credit card to help them start managing their credit and building that credit. So if your child goes off to college, they'll probably be getting a advertisement coming home and saying, should I get this? So that's a nice service. And maybe some other credit cards offer these low limits. It's a good way to start out and to avoid getting too deep in debt. And then finally, parents should ask their own credit card company about if they can add their teen as an authorized user. Just lets the kid get an additional card that they can use, but again, be aware that this can be dangerous because it's still the parent's credit card and all the reporting goes to the parent's credit report if there's an issue. So there must be clear expectations when a child is an authorized user, preferably get the authorized user on one of those low limit credit cards. Next, on the next slide, let's talk about a little bit about investing, because we mentioned that earlier that we don't think it's a good starting point right now because of the risks. But if a child does want to learn a little bit about investing, there are a few apps out there that have some safeguards in place. For example, Greenlight requires the parent to approve a trade. So a child can, look into investments, but not actually make a transaction unless the parent approves it. That's very, very good way to watch them from getting too much in debt, especially if they offer some type of margin loan agreement where the child can borrow. We want to make sure there's limits in place. Acorns is another one that can help with some long-term savings if the child wants to start putting some money away in investments. They will take a purchase that's linked to that credit or debit card and invest the difference in the portfolio that you choose. So if they go out to dinner and charge $19.50, that purchase was rounded up to $20, with 50 cents going into the portfolio. But just be careful with apps out there. Like I said, there's plenty of investing apps out there, but a lot of them do not have limits or controls that you can have with the child. Like Robinhood and Coinbase. We don't really think kids are ready to have free reign of the investment market right now. So, day trading options, even crypto, can quickly lead to money lost quickly. So when using any app, check the privacy policy to see how the personal information is also shared. Some of them offer free apps because they want that marketing information. So check to make sure they're not sharing any personal information that you don't want shared. So it's always best, to set those privacy settings to make sure that information is not shared these days.
Okay, so our final topic that we want to get into are career considerations, thinking longer term. It's a very big decision of what you want to be when you grow up. I distinctly remember having to make college decisions and people asking me, and I was like, I don't know, I've never done any of those things. So how can I really say this is what I want to be? So some ways to help your graduating or upcoming rising senior to evaluate some jobs or opportunities longer term are, to seek input from others. Guidance counselors are trained at this. So, definitely involve them as part of the mix. Obviously, talking to family and friends, even if you're not in a career that might be contemplated, maybe you know of somebody and can have your teen talk with them about different things. And I really think it's also important to consider different aspects, like how much interfacing are you having with others? How much are you at your desk versus out and about? How much you need to be in one location for your career versus able to move around. So different things to, relative to just life and preferences. Obviously, you can also talk with teachers and alumni that might be experiencing things. I'm a pretty firm believer in aptitude testing as part of the decision-making process. Some high schools offer this. There are also private institutions, but it helps to layer what an individual enjoys and what an individual is good at, because ideally you're going to have the best experience with a career if those two overlap, that you're not miserable going to work, you're enjoying it, and that you're succeeding in what you're doing. So it can help to give you some further ideas that perhaps you haven't even thought about. And that internships, whether they be in high school or in college, or just beyond, can really be valuable, that they give you, real life experiencing in, okay, is this career kind of what I thought it would be? Do you enjoy it? Or are you like, this is not what I had expected? If nothing else, it helps you to build your resume so that you might stay on deck when an employer is looking at resumes versus, moving to the backside because you haven't had the experience, and then helping to build a professional network, which I think we all know is important in career development. The amount that someone will earn should definitely not be the only reason. All of those other considerations should be part of the decision-making process. That said, we do think it is really important to consider as part of the decision because it helps you to achieve some of those goals that we talked about earlier in terms of providing for yourself, giving opportunities for yourself and your family. So some of the things to consider are, what are the earnings potentials? You can go online and look at different careers and what the earnings might be, and maybe even by geographic region. How those earnings relate to other financial needs and objectives, such as, housing. And again, looking at what in a geographic region housing might be in New York, DC, Richmond, wherever. And other living expenses. Again, that checklist can help you to consider some of those other expenses, and also considering what the amount is after taxes, not just the amount of gross earnings maybe reported on a website. I have had so many children of clients or other individuals be astonished when they get their first paycheck and they're like, wait a second, I was supposed to be earning X and I only got Y, and Y is distinctly less than X, and it's because of taxes. If student loans are going to be part of the mix, again, adding that to the budget to make sure that those can be serviced relative to earnings and other expenses. And then thinking ahead to what amount you might be able or willing to supplement as somebody launches in their career and starts off at more of a initial base earnings, whether that be helping with rent or other expenses, and really talking about, if you're willing to, for how long. This page, as we wrap up, gives you, as I mentioned, going back to our SageVest Kids website, some of the different blog topics that we think are most relevant to teens graduating from high school, just some of the different topics relevant to their age group, topics on savings, how to manage money and teach money in high school and beyond. Some of the questions to think about as you're visiting colleges or choosing a college, things that will impact your career, your child's future career decisions, and to consider on the jobs and internships considerations, and then if you're going to be applying for FAFSA. So, we covered a lot in this presentation. We recognize that there might be some follow-up questions. So if there are, we invite you to contact us. Our information is below, again, offering the 2 websites that we have, as well as how to contact us by email or phone. And we hope that this has been informative to you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.